Thank you very much, TK Tsakani, and good morning to members of the media, the viewers back at home. Just most sincere appreciation at your diligence to this media briefing so that you are able to help us to communicate this message to the rest of the country, households, and business alike, because the issue of load shedding has got different stages of load shedding. And as they see the results of the work that we are doing over a passage of time. In the last briefing, I indicated that I will be visiting Kusile, and I really want to express my appreciation and the members of the media who came along with us to go to Kusile so that they can have first-hand information, appreciation through observation, the work that we are doing in relation to the civil and the mechanical work to ensure that we put in place the temporary stacks to allow us to return to service the 3 units, Unit 1, 2, 3, that have been removed from load as a result of the structural related to the chimney, which was as a result of the flue gas desulfurization unit, really a component that is meant to remove the amount of sulfur from the emissions that into the atmosphere. I made the point that Kusile presents a significant path out of load shedding, and I'm going to take time to share to allow us an opportunity to expand the grid, strengthen the grid at the rate that will make it possible for us to accommodate new generating capacity, especially the ones that are coming from renewable energy sources. So, as indicated before, we are hosting that grid financing or transmission financing seminar, working together with the JSE as a reputable aggregator of the financing community in the country. They've got a full appreciation of what are some of the requirements of the financing fraternity for them to be able to participate in a possible instrument that will be directed towards the fine, but largely those that have gone through a similar experience, an experience of unmet demand, and also an experience of an accelerated onboarding of renewable energy solutions. So we'll be also learning from those experiences in relation to how these countries have been able to deal with such an experience and encounter, and then we'll be able to learn and unlearn from their experiences. So I really want to take you through what has been the performance of the grid over the past 5 days. Remember that I do the following. We share with you what has been the situation in relation to available capacity, and we stress this, the period Monday to Friday, so that there's an appreciation of what has been the capacity that has been available. You see, when we opened the week on the Monday, the 11th of September, the available capacity was sitting at 26,332 megawatts. And as we closed the week, this period that I'm assessing, we are sitting at 27,760 megawatts. I did make the point previously that we have ramped up on the planned maintenance. Of course, ramping up is relative to what was the situation during the winter period. Remember, as part of our winter outlook and our winter plan was to say that we are going to reduce planned maintenance considerably. We had done a significant amount of work as we entered the winter period, and we're going to cap it at about 2,000 megawatts. And you can see that as we emerged out of the cold period, we took advantage of a reduced demand as a result of the weather that was becoming warmer, and that planned outages now. When we entered Monday, the 11th of September, was just shy of 5,000 megawatts, and the average over the period this Monday to Friday was 4,801 megawatts. So essentially, we ramped it up close to 2.5 times what was the period, what was the situation during the winter period. And like I said earlier on, I think that also had a contribution towards the elevated stages of load shedding. But I think an area that requires attention is for us to be able to undermine the regularity of the units tripping, the units failing, and that's why planned maintenance is key, because our ability to undermine what we call unplanned capacity loss factor, the units just tripping on their own, it's a function of the investments we're making upfront to secure the reliability of these units. And that's why planned maintenance is important, and the reward you are going to see over a period of time is that there's going to be less and less of these units failing on their own. And as the units become more resilient, they're able to generate the megawatts, then they are adding on the capacity available, and we'll be able to see an improvement of the situation. Again, the average for the 5 days of the unplanned capacity loss factor was 16,588 megawatts. That's still significant even by our own account. We have set ourselves a target that we should be sub 15,000 megawatt as a start, and then progressively we really want to be sub 14,000 megawatts. And it's something that the team led by Mr. Numalo is working hard on to ensure that we're able to address that situation. And then the other area of attention is the partial load losses. Essentially, the units are on load. The units are not necessarily failing, but the units are not giving us the amount of megawatts that they should be giving us relative to their design capacity. And this is a function of a number of factors, and we know when we enter the summer period, it could be a function of ambient temperature. The more hot it gets, very difficult for some of these units to perform. And of course, Matimba is a prime candidate of partial load losses that are likely going to increase as you go into the more extreme hot periods of the year. But it's something that is receiving attention to ensure that we don't fall foul to such a situation. Of course, a lot of engineering solutions will be required. So it's something that is receiving attention, and you can see that over the period, the partial load losses were above 5,600 megawatts. Of course, we are entering the warmer periods of the year, as you would expect that the PM focus should be significantly lower than what was during the winter period. An area that receives attention from time to time, and this area is around the units at risk. So essentially what the team does is to make a determination the period it has taken for the units to have been taken out on planned maintenance, and also just an appreciation that if these units don't get to be taken out on planned maintenance, about 4,345. And this explains the work that we are doing on the planned maintenance. So the planned maintenance really is tracking these units that are at risk, and we continue to take them out so that they don't get to fail going into the future abruptly, and then that calls for us to be able to correct the energy balance by intensifying load shedding. So you really want to bring down this unit at risk. So the planned maintenance is going to help us to do two parts. The first one is to ensure that we reduce the amount of the units that are at risk, because in terms of our own projections, we'll have an appreciation that unit X, unit Y receive attention, although it continues to give us the megawatts, but we need to take it out, and that's why the team is making a significant amount of work on the planning side to ensure that as the unit comes out, we're able to work on it and retain it on the date that is promised. So planned maintenance will help us to bring down the amount of megawatts that are at risk. The second part that the planned maintenance will do is to ensure that there's resilience and reliability of these units, and therefore undermine that megawatts that continue to fail on their own, what we call unplanned capacity loss factor. And if we address those two, it means that we have more megawatts available, and then if we have more megawatts available, it means that we don't have to go the kind of severity of load shedding that we are experiencing. And in fact, in some instances, there could be some degree of reprieve that is given to the economy and the households. And then on the outage slips, of course, we reached a peak where we achieved about 766 megawatts. So really what the outage slips means is our ability to meet the promise of the return to service of these units. So if we fail to return these units on the time, the date that we had promised, these units then fall into the category of outage slips, and it's a function of planning. And we have seen that gradually over a period of time, we have brought it down, I think, from a high of close to 3,000 megawatts. So the team is doing everything possible to ensure that we are able to bring it down. And of course, the sooner you return the units back into service, the greater the capacity available and the less the intensity of load shedding. And then just a summary, remember I said that we are going to use May as a baseline because of the intensity of planned maintenance. You can see that, like I said, when we went into the May period, that planned maintenance was sitting at about 3,000 megawatts. And then when we went into the warm-up period, we ramped it up to about, it went to a high of about 6,000 megawatts. And I just showed you that we're averaging about 4,800 megawatts the last week. And then the planned outages, I did make the point that, of course, we continue to ramp that up. You can see during the early first week of September, we're sitting above 5,500 megawatts. We had moved from a peak of in August of about 6,000 megawatts. And we're doing this because of the opportunity that presented itself with lower demand, so that we were able to get these units in the right place. Like I said, we have to do the right things, and that's why we are not going to compromise on planned maintenance to ensure that when these units return to service, we are able to derive a maximum value out of this. Just on Kusile, just as an update, remember that there's Unit 4 of Kusile that were taken out on a 20-day outage. And that contributed, if you like, to that ramped up the planned maintenance. And I'll speak to that Unit 4 when we're expecting to return it. So that one is on the planned maintenance cycle. It was on a 20-day planned maintenance cycle. And remember that these units are picking about 800 megawatts. So when we entered the warmer period, we took out that Unit 4 and essentially took out 800 megawatts. And that 800 megawatts, what it does, it adds on the planned maintenance, but also what it does, it reduces the available capacity by 800 megawatts. So that's an appreciation that the people should have. And Unit 1 and 3, they are the ones, those units that failed around October of last year as a result of the flue gas desulfurization unit. Just to explain this in simple terms, we have an obligation to reduce the amount of emissions into the atmosphere. As you know, coal is a dirty fuel, so it's important that we are able to protect the environment, neighboring communities, and we know that the accumulation of these emissions leads to climate change. So it's an established science, and climate change, we can see the devastating impact of climate change. You see flooding, you see the amount of drought, you see the amount of fires. So it's significant, and it's especially devastating poor communities. So what had happened is that the newer power stations like Kusile and Medupi have got an additional obligation. Unlike the much older power stations, the need for us to be able to remove the sulfur from the emissions that we get to release as we generate this power. And the unit that is being used to reduce the amount of sulfur content is what we call the flue gas desulfurization unit. Essentially is a chemical reaction that makes it possible for us to contain the sulfur, and all other particulates are addressed through some engineering mechanism. So we know at Kusile what had happened is that because of the failure of that chemical process, instead of the emissions really resulted in this unit just emitting, if you like, slurry, and that slurry got to be stuck on the walls of the chimney that is meant to release these emissions into the atmosphere. And over a period of time, there was an accumulation of that slurry, and as a result of that accumulation, it undermined or threaten the structural integrity of the chimney. And then these units were discontinued. They were removed out of service. So what this meant is that it resulted in 3 units being added onto that unplanned capacity loss factor. So if you know these units are packing 800 megawatts each, 8 times 3, 2,400 megawatts, then gets to be removed from the available capacity. We account for it in the unplanned structural compromise on the chimney. And then what we did was to find an engineering solution to bypass the flue gas desulfurization unit, essentially relenting on our obligation to remove the sulfur content so that we have a temporary measure to be able to exploit this asset, and we must get back the 2,400 megawatts back on stream. But we didn't end there. We accepted that we have got an obligation to the environment, and then applied to the Minister of Fishery and Forestry Environment to say that we need a temporary exemption as we do this analysis on a more enduring solution to ensure that we return the flue gas desulfurization unit, we meet our parameters in relation to emissions. So we have an obligation to ensure that we are able to meet all of that. And then I'll share with you how far are we on the journey to retaining these 3 units, because we're given the permission, the exemption, if you like, temporary exemption, I must add, for us to use the stacks, the temporary stacks, and then we had committed ourselves that by the end of 2024, we want to restore, if you like, normality to Kusile. Normality in this instance means we are going to meet our emissions parameters, the license parameters there at Kusile. And then we know that Kusile is still a construction site. So we have 1, 2, 3 units that were commissioned. I just explained to you how they were removed out of service as a result of the flue gas desulfurization unit. And then we had Unit 4 that had already been commissioned. I just explained to you that we took out Unit 4 for planned maintenance for 20 days. I'll give you the update on where we are. So we took out that Unit 4. Then there's Unit 5 and Unit 6. Unit 5 was not commissioned. So now the team is working on the commissioning of Unit 5, and I'm happy to say that by the end of 24. And once Unit 6 is done, so Kusile as a construction site now is complete. So the South African economy can then benefit from the investments that we have made on Kusile. So where are we now? Let me take you through. Remember, I said Unit 4, we took it out as a result of planned maintenance. I'm happy to say, and then we then committed that Unit 4 should come back on the 17th of September, which is today. And I'm happy to say to the country that Unit 4, I think now is back. This morning, Unit 4 is back. I really want to congratulate Mr. Nxumalo. This is a date they set for themselves, and I did ask him, aren't you over-ambitious in retaining this? Say, we are confident about our ability. And thank you very much to Mr. Nxumalo. Thanks to the team at Kusile, Unit 4 is back online. So essentially, we're getting 800 megawatts. So if we get this 800 megawatt, what does it do to the numbers that I showed you? It adds 800 megawatts to the capacity available. And then it removes 800 megawatts from the planned maintenance. So essentially that 4,800 plus planned maintenance comes down by 800 megawatts. So that 27,000 or so megawatts of capacity available, we add 800 megawatts. And then if my math is correct, then we are getting to about 28,500 megawatts. So that's what Unit 4 does. So very close to giving us one full stage of load shedding, just shaving off one stage of load shedding. And then the team had initially around March said, in terms of their projections, they are going to bring back Unit 3 by the 28th of November. So when we said with Mr. Nxumalo, and this was fresh on his appointment, he then said, look, I think it's important that we find an engineering solution that can fast-track the return of these 3 units without compromising the engineering quality, that work that we're doing on these units. And then when we were there in March, they had indicated, around April, they had indicated that in terms of their projection, they'll be returning this unit by the 28th of November. And as a result of the work that Mr. Nxumalo has been doing with the team at Kusile, Zandi, who's leading the construction team, Chris, who are working on the construction team, together with the people who have been working with us on Kusile, then they've worked out an engineering solution. When we went back, they were able to say to us, look, we have done a lot of modeling. We have been able to ensure that those events that can be done simultaneously, essentially you don't have to sequence them one after the other. You can do them in parallel. They've ramped up, if you like, the rate at which they were doing the work. So we're able to say to the country that we've been able to shave a month on the return of this unit. So the expectation is that we should be able to return this unit 3 by the 14th of October. The same is applicable to unit 1. When we went there, they had said, look, we think that we can give it to you by December. We came back 3 months later. They've done some work. And of course, it was important that we take the media to on-site so that you can see the stakes are complete. They've done the cold commissioning, the mechanical work is done, the civils work is done, the cold commissioning, when we were on site, they were doing it, so now they are going to get into a stage of hot commissioning, essentially now running the units. That's what we call hot commissioning. And then they say they've revised that, and then the 30th of October, we should get that Unit 1. So what is the significance of this? Is that Unit 3 and Unit 1 will be received by October. Next month, we get an additional 1,600 megawatts. So remember, this is not new generation, because we had to remove them from service. So we are going to remove that column that I always share with you on the unplanned capacity loss factor. Now we minus another 1,600 megawatts. And then that 1,600 megawatts is deposited on the available capacity. So essentially, you are getting close to, if you like, just shy of other shaving 2 stages of load shedding. So remember now, you have Unit 4 running. I did say now it's running. By the end of October, you'll have Unit 1 and 3 running. So the accumulation of these 3 units is 2,400 megawatts. The story doesn't end there. So the team that says, then there's a unit missing. I told you there's Unit 1, 2, 3 that had failed. So I must account for Unit 2. So the team had said they'll give us Unit 2 by the 24th of December. This is when we visited. Mr. Nxumalo said with the team, done exceptional amount of work. They have come back to us and say, we can give you Unit 2 by the 30th of November. So from today until the 30th of November, we've got potential to get 3,200 megawatts. And that's why I kept on emphasizing, Kusile is central to us addressing the load shedding question. I'm just saying addressing the load shedding question because we'll need significant more additional capacity, generating capacity, to be able to address this. And then it also gets more exciting. That now, in the totality of the grid, we're going to add another 800 megawatts. That's Unit 5. Remember, Unit 5, as we speak now, it doesn't exist. It doesn't exist because we have not fired it. The Unit 4, 1, 2, 3, they existed, but Unit 4, we took it out for planned maintenance. 1, 2, 3, they failed for reasons that I've explained above. Now there's new generating capacity. We're adding 800 megawatts. The time they'd given us was to say that they'll give it to us by the 28th of October. Now this one, we have pushed it back. Let me explain why we have pushed it back. Unit 5, because it takes time for us to synchronize, you are not going to get to just suddenly just ramp it up to give it your design capacity, because it's still a construction, if you like. It's not on the operation side, because you must check. It's for the first time we are doing it, we are putting it online, so it's going to take us a bit of time for us to get this megawatt. So what we had said is that if you come to think of it, between now and November, you are commissioning 4 units. But 5 units. It's 4 plus 1. The 1 is Unit 5. So we said, focus your work on the commercial units. What is a commercial units? They are those units that will give us the megawatts immediately. And we said, push back the unit that we're going to synchronize over time. And that's why you see that we have moved Kusile 5 from the 28th of October so that we focus on unit 1, 2, 3, and 4, or rather 4, 3, 1, and 2. So the sequence is important for you to understand what we are doing. But for the purposes of this, we're focusing on those units that are going to go into commercial operation and give us the megawatts immediately. So when I say unit 4 is back, for an example, this morning, it means that the economy is benefiting from 800 megawatts. When I say unit 5 is coming, you will not get 800 megawatts immediately. It will be over a period of time as we synchronize it gradually. And that's why we've been able to push it back. So what is the potential? So I'm saying to you that there's 4,000 megawatts that we are bringing on stream. So we can account for unit 4, we can account unit 1, 2, 3. We know that until November we get that 3,200, 2,400 megawatts from 1, 2, 3. I just told you we're getting 800 megawatts. Then we're closer to resolving this problem. I'm not saying we have resolved this problem. I'm saying we're closer to resolving this problem because you need that additional generating capacity. You need that emergency power that we spoke of. Remember when we came into the office, when the president unveiled the energy action plan, we were saying that we need 6,000 megawatts. There's been significant improvement on the energy availability factor over a period of time. So we're getting closer and closer to that. So that's the point that I'm making. But then there are risks, I must add. Remember I told you that essentially when we want to commission unit 1 to 3, we are saying that we need an exemption. We're given that exemption by the minister, and we had said to the Minister of Fishery and Forestry that by the end of 2024, we'll make sure that we return back the flue gas desulfurization unit. We have done an analysis on the chimney, and then we'll be within our license parameters. And the minister gave us that exemption, and then we started construction. Well, this is a democratic country. Then we invite any objections. And then I think there were about 4 objections that were received. And then the minister has got an obligation to say to ESCOM, say to me how you are going to address these things. Really, they are largely about the health of that communities, their protection with regards to degradation of the environment, our obligation to ensure that we protect the environment, the issues around the health plan, whether we're able to do consistent monitoring. If we exceed certain limits, we're able to alert communities and therefore, and also have mitigating measures. The team has put that together. We have responded because we have an obligation to respond. So what is the risk? The risk if there's a continued exercise of litigation that says, no, don't commission because of this and that, and we have done everything possible on our side responding to all these questions to make it possible for us to be able to, over a period of the next 13 months or so, 14 months, because we are committing to December, or 15 months to December of 2024, to restore normality. We want that exemption, or requested rather the exemption, we got it, and then there were those objections. We responded to, responding to those objections diligently, line by line. We don't abrogate our responsibility to those communities who have responded. That's the only risk that sits. So why am I mentioning this? Because that risk then undermines our ability to return those units that I spoke of, unit 1, 2, and 3. I gave you the dates, 14 October, 30 October, 30th of November. If this objection then sees the light of day, we are able to sufficiently explain ourselves, and we don't get that, then we'll not get the 2,400 megawatts. And then that puts significant amount of strain on the work that we are doing. But we are more than confident. The team has applied itself, got the best experts, engaged with communities, responded comprehensively. We'll leave that in the hands of the minister, and it's not our intention to interfere. She'll apply her mind, and at the right time give us the feedback. Thank you very much, sir.
Thank you very much, Minister. We will now take questions from the media. We will start with the members of the media who are present in the room, followed by questions that have been sent online. But before I do that, I'd like to introduce those who've joined the Minister today. To his immediate left, we've got Ms. Daphne Mukwena, from Eskom. Next to her is Mr. Silas Zimu, the Minister's Special Advisor. And next to him is Mr. Begi Ngumalo, the Head of Generation at Eskom. And then next to him is Mr. Rudy Dix, who's part of the National Energy Crisis Committee, and he's from the presidency. By show of hands, can we commence with the question and answer session? Do we have any questions in the room?
Thanks, DK. Morning, everyone. Minister, one wants to appreciate the scientific variables that are taken into consideration for ultimately arriving at the sum of the equation that you guys use for availability factor. And I speak about the planned and maintenance issues. But I think the interest then becomes in what I'd like to call maybe a not so scientific variable, which is the pressures that come from the desulfurization and climate change issues. I think as a country we understand the devastation that load shedding has in regards to the economy. There's an argument currently that it seems as if the people are not necessarily taken care of vis-a-vis the international relations, perhaps because of this. And I say this because, yes, we might be the highest or in the top 10 in terms of per capita emissions. However, developed countries are sort of, there's a study that says they've contributed about 79% historically. Now, a question then becomes, why is it that a normal civilian as a South African should be sort of disadvantaged by this unscientific variable?
Thank you. Do we have another question in the room? If not, Vanessa, do we have questions on online?
Yes, we do. We have about 21 questions so far. For the first round, the questions are as follows. Helmo Proys from Independent Media. I see Eskom has revived the Dubatsi pump storage scheme. Could you please answer the following questions? Here are 7 questions. 1, what is the capacity of the turbines in megawatts and the dams in million cubic meters? What is the projected cost and how will it be financed? Who will own the asset, the generation company or the transmission company? What are the timelines? When will the tenders be issued? When will construction start? And when will the final unit enter commercial operation? Will Eskom outsource the project management? What measures have been put in place to prevent a slurry buildup? At what capacity is Kusile Unit 4 operating at this morning? Those are all questions from Helmo Proys at Independent Media. William Horn from Netwerk 24. 3 questions. Why were OCGTs not run for more than half generated into the grid from each of the units 1, 2, and 3? Chris Yelland, EE Business Intelligence. Dinana Erasmus from Business Day. She has 2 questions. What is Eskom's budget for maintenance this financial year, and how much has been spent so far? How does the budget for maintenance for this financial year compare with the actual spend on maintenance in the previous 2 financial years? Ferial Hafaji from Daily Maverick has 3 questions. Eskom's updated system status report makes assumptions for a weekly 16,000 megawatts UCLF for the foreseeable future. This is much higher than before. What has happened? The OCTGs are apparently not generating for the past few days according to the daily system reports. Are we out of diesel or out of budget for diesel? The last questions from Ferial Hafaji is, are we finished with stage 6 for the foreseeable future? I'll pause here. Thank you.
Thank you, Vanessa. the podium. We'll start with Mr. Mumari.
I think there's one. But let her deal with the major ones first. No, that's it.
Okay, good morning, members of the public. I think the first question that deals with an offset, I'll leave that one to yourself, Minister, the climate change and the issues here. The issue of the new palm storage, as reference is made to against the proposed in Limpopo, which is the Tubatsi. It's a 1,500 megawatt station. So obviously this is still in the very early stages. So the process that we will undertake to advertise that it's going to be the normal ESCOM and national treasury requirements in terms of how we go out on getting the partners that will work with us to deal with that new palm storage when it's still in the development phase currently. So it's not something that is on the market as yet, but definitely the public will know when we go into the market. And then there was also the issue of the Kusile Unit 4. The minister just indicated Kusile just synchronized now in the morning around 8:45. So it's still ramping up as well. So you synchronize at almost a quarter of the capacity, and then you ramp the machine up during the day to full capacity. So currently it just synchronized now, so it's still ramping up. And then there was a question about the OCGTs not running this week. Maybe let me explain that, because it also, one of the addition is not the issue of budget and all of that. I think there has been some industry issue with the value chain on the supply of diesel to the country, because all our suppliers, our main supplier, they didn't have enough. So, but from this week, from the 18th, then they will start getting more deliveries. So it was really not the issue of budget, it was more the issue on the value chain side, that I think the colleagues on that space, they will also give us more reports in terms of what has happened. And I think that's what resulted in the lower reserves on the our tanks, and then also utilizations on the pump storage a bit more, which then necessitated this stage 6 that we had as well, because we needed just to make sure that the system adequacy is still maintained. And then the issue from Chris Yelland about Kusile 1, 2, 3, I think we have indicated in the past media brief that this unit will return at full capacity, because the only thing that is not there is just the sulfur removal portion of the plant, but other plant areas, including the normal particulate emissions, are still intact. So the units will return at full capacity. There's no restrictions for the machines to go on full capacity. I think the maintenance budget is around 11 billion for this year, about 10.8 that we plan to spend this year. Obviously, we're just starting now the main period as well. You know, some of the units like Kusile just close the things now. We will we do reconciliations end of the month, and then that's how we're gonna go through them. I think the idea is to make sure that we don't exceed that budget, and then we carry on as such. The VGP report, it is, like you said, it's an NT document. I think I will leave that one to the minister to deal with it. I did touch on, there was another question for the Dairy Maverick as well, talking about OCGT, which is what I've just explained as well from the top side in terms of why we had to, there was a supply issue with the diesel from the industry, but our suppliers, they've promised that from tomorrow they will be getting the supply. So we anticipated that this week we will start getting back to normalities. That luckily on the palm storage side, we managed to recover. From yesterday, our palm storage are adequate as well. So the only portion that we're still recovering is going to be on the diesel. And then some of the units that we brought back as well this week, I think you've seen from the minister's brief that contributed as well, especially at Kendal and Matla. They've returned 2 units each, which also assisted with this situation where we are as we speak now. Thanks, Minister.
Thanks.
Thanks, colleagues. Thanks, Minister. Mine is just going to be a quick one on the first question, and I think that's important. And I think you're spot on. I think it's quite critical for us that South Africa and the government has taken a decision quite clearly. What we need to address fundamentally is a shortage of energy supply. How we achieve that is not a question, right? So we need to find and focus on that. And it's why it's important to understand the decisions that we've taken, particularly around whether we need to reconsider, for example, decommissioning schedules. That's quite critical, because if we are unable to ensure that we have a steady energy supply, nothing can happen. We can't do any of the economic activity, neither can we able to meet the needs that the country requires. So I think it's quite important. But your point is spot on. I mean, I think that as we deal with the UNFCCC and the climate commitments, our position has been fairly clear as South Africa, that the onus, the vast majority of the onus on climate commitments is the industrialization that have taken place over the past few hundred years, and that has been done by developed countries. The responsibility, including the financing of that, must lay with them, and I think that's the kind of a message that we've always and consistently given. But it also doesn't deflect from the fact that we have responsibility, and your point is correct. Per capita, if we compare it to our comparator countries, we are a relatively higher emitter, so we also have commitments towards that. But the most important part is for us right now to meet our energy security needs. But we do have that commitment, for example, on meeting our commitments related to national determined contribution and reducing our emissions as we go along. We cannot compromise the lives of South Africans, and I think that's quite important. And so in our conversations, if we talk about transitioning, then we must talk about a just transition. It's important, your point again, that you say it cannot be at the expense of ordinary citizens, it cannot be at the expense of workers. We need to ensure that they are addressed, and that if there are going to be reskilling or if there are going to be other sectors of growth, that we create those opportunities and we address fundamentally those changes. So we can't go into a just energy transition without fundamentally addressing some of the just components and the necessity for us to be able to address the impact and the possible consequences and unintended consequences if we do that. So I think it's quite important for us to balance that. But South Africa has taken a fairly clear position globally. It's taken a fairly clear position even locally around what is our most immediate need, and our most immediate need, as the Minister has expressed on countless occasions, is to meet our energy security needs. Thanks. Thanks, Minister.
Thank you very much, colleagues, Becky and Rudy. Maybe just on the first question, and that, just to say the following in addition to what Rudy was saying, is that's why when we were at the COP, the developing countries advocated for equal but differentiated responsibilities. The fact that the industrialized developed North accounts for 96% of the emissions, and the developing countries account for 4% of emissions, I think there's an appreciation that there has to be differentiated responsibilities. The second part is that in the consideration, we argue of whether you continue to grant the license, you must compute in that the socioeconomic impact, the point you are making. So we don't deny our obligations to the environment, neighboring communities, those who are in the catchment area of the power station, catchment in terms of geographic footprint. And that's why we go at length Beggie's team and the team at ESCOM responsible for the environment to provide a comprehensive response on how we are going to put in place the mitigating measures to ensure that we continue to observe and monitor the impact of these emissions on neighboring communities, and also to say what else are we going to do to respond to that. So that's the one part of the equation. The other part of the equation is that we know stage 6 load shedding, cost about, depending who you read, up to 1 billion rands a day. You know the devastation it has caused to the South African economy. The Minister of Finance makes the point that one of the structural constraints to the South African economy is load shedding, and the other one is the issues of logistics. So clearly the economy won't recover. We are going to continue to push people into conditions of abject poverty, people out of employment. The economy will continue to contract. It's going to threaten the social wage. So we need to do something to resolve this load shedding. And we are saying that Kusile sits on the critical part. So we think we can do both. Allow the temporary interventions with the attendant mitigating measures, and we are committing that by the end of 2024, we'll restore normality and ensure that you address the issues of the gaseous emissions, especially on the sulfur dioxide. So in that way, you are resolving both. You are allowing the South African economy to recover. You still are taking care of your obligation in relation to those communities. But it can't be one against the other. And that's why we think that the dispensation of the exemption will help us to do that. On the JSE issues, the financing choices, like I said, we allow that to take shape, the conversations to happen, and then of course we'll sponsor what we think, having learned and heard from the industry and our peers on how they resolve similar questions, problems in their own countries. We'll then find out what is the optimal solution to be able to address this situation. And then on the issues, Ferial on the UCLF higher than before, of course we'll respond to this. We will come with a summer plan towards the end of the year, or of the month, or early in October. We'll share that. But I was just taking interest on some of commentators. Underline, I said commentators, I didn't say experts. They make the point that the year-on-year UCLF now it's higher compared to the previous years. Yes, it will be. Because if you do year-on-year, you had the benefit of the 3 units of Kusile. Now they are out. Therefore, it's going to be higher. And that's why it's important you distinguish between an expert and a commentator, because an expert will know that. And a commentator is someone who's just interviewed more frequently and then rises to a pseudo analyst when we know that there is nothing scientific they are offering. But remember, our responsibility is not to respond to commentators, is to resolve the load shedding question, insulate ourselves from those comments, just transfixed on the resolution of this problem. And we are getting closer to the resolution of this problem. And once we have resolved it, then we'll have an intellectual encounter with the so-called experts. But for now, our focus is the resolution of load shedding. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Minister and colleagues. Vanessa, can you take us through the last round of questions that have been shared online?
Terence Greenberg, News. He has 3 questions. Please, could you explain the misalignment between ESCOM's published 52-week outlook and its week 36 status report and the messages that we receive at these weekly briefings regarding the improved outlook for load shedding and unplanned breakdowns? Will the grid financing seminar with the JSE this week be open to the media? His last questions: are the diesel value chain issues linked in any way to the reported reported dispute between SARS and certain bunkering fuel suppliers. Siphelele Dludla from the Business Report. Congratulations to Mr. Beking Kumalo and the ESCOM team on returning Kusile Unit 4 online by the set deadline. He has 2 questions. 1, how sure is ESCOM that Unit 4 will not suffer unplanned breakdowns very soon, especially from the boiler tube leaks, which have troubled many units at different power stations? If this happens, God forbid, what will it mean in the bigger scheme of things, since Kusile will not be generating any electricity until Units 1, 2, and 3 are brought back, or until Unit 5 and 6 are synchronized? That's Siphelele Dludla from Business Report. Chris Yelland from EE Business Intelligence. Noting the sudden reduction of ESCOM and IPP OCGT load factor this week during high levels of load shedding, did ESCOM run out of diesel stock last week, or did ESCOM run out of budget for the diesel last week? Dinena Erasmus from Business Day. Can ESCOM elaborate on the programs at Grotvlei, Duduga, Creole, and Kendall, which were the worst performing stations in August? And what interventions and maintenance are underway to improve performance at these stations? The maintenance budget was not answered. She's referring to her previous question, that's Dinene Erasmus. What was the maintenance spend in the previous 2 financial years? The last question is from William Horn from Netwerk 24. Doesn't planned maintenance, as being done now, require up to a 2-year lead time to plan for, to differentiate it from reactionary maintenance? Those are all the questions we have. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We'll start with Mr. Numalo again, but I do believe the maintenance budget spend was responded to, but he'll take the podium.
Thank you, Secretary. Indeed, the maintenance budget, I did touch to it, so it's 11 billion, so, but maybe the portion of the last 2 years, that one we can come back with also. For that here. I think the issue of the diesel, maybe just to emphasize as well, it's not that we did run diesel, if you recall as well last week. It's not that there was no OCGT run. Both ESCOM and IPP OCGTs did run last week, but obviously the system operator must always maintain certain levels of the adequacy within the system. So it's not that we ran out of diesels completely. We did run the OCGTs, although it didn't run it as hard as you would normally run under normal circumstances. And it was really not about any dispute that is there with other supplier. I think Terence was asking that if it was due to some SARS dispute. No, it was nothing to that effect. I think it was more just the supply that I said that they would be receiving from the 18. That's what we got from our suppliers. So that is really what is happening there. Okay, the maintenance, I did touch on it. And then there was a question about Grotvlei, Tutuga, and Arnold. I think maybe one thing that I need to state, especially with regard to Grotvlei. Grotvlei, as we speak, they're running 2 of 3 units at 66% availability. Last week they had a boiler leak on their units, so it's one of the stations that actually, when it's run very well. It's one of those stations that, because of the maintenance decisions we have taken, we didn't invest properly on them. But we are now putting good money as them to deal with the main issues at Grotvlei is more on the boilers. And then the Tutuga, Tutuga, you will notice that, you remember that around the winter month we ran on average with 1 unit there. So we have since returned to 3 units, and then the fourth one is going to be coming. We had some issues at Tutuga, mainly on the vibrations on our turbines. So our teams from both our OEMs and our maintenance team at Rocheville, they've been working on that. The thing with the turbine is that if you pick up an issue on it, you need about 5 days to cool it down, and then another 15 days to open it up just to see what is the problem. So that's why when we pick up some of these issues, I think we have tasked engineering to relook at the whole issues around because we pick up that actually the bad place where this turbine seated Tutuga had some movement on it. That's why we had such vibrations as well that we picked up there. So Arnott is actually is one of the stations that has improved on their performance. Currently, they're running 5 out of 6, and then 1 unit is on an outage, which is unit 1. So they will have some partials that they had, but I think Arnott this past week actually they've run extremely well. Yeah, the station, like I've indicated, that did not do well this past week was mostly Matla and Kendall. Matla was more to do with some of the issues on the dust handling plant that they needed to resolve, and also so as Kendall. Okay, I think Chris Ellen was asking about the issue of the diesel as well, which I've just explained. Then with regard to Unit 4, whether at Kusile, whether it will suffer the boiler tube leaks. Obviously, what we do with every opportunity, although this outage was led by the absorber on the FGDs, we took every opportunity to inspect all other areas. Luckily, on the boilers, we know which areas are prone to wear. But as you know, there's thousands of kilometers, hundreds of kilometers in the boiler, so you would not get into each of those as well. So yeah, the tube leaks can happen, but we have taken measures to mitigate those issues that might weaken us there. So obviously, if it has to come off, because we always protect the plant and protect the employees as well. If there's a risk that the plant gets damaged, it's better to take it off for 3 days rather than to allow it to run with the risk and then it's off for a month and all of those things. So we've got clear guidance and strict procedures that we follow when the tube leaks happen on any of the stations, not on the Kusile. Thanks, Minister.
Thank you very much, Becky. Chris, just to your earlier question on the report that was commissioned by NT, whether it will be made public or not, shared with the media, so that the ownership of the report resides with National Treasury. So I'm not in a position to state what they intend to do with that report. Of course, we'll have access to it because of the responsibility of the office, and we can benefit from some of the arguments that have been made in the report and what the recommendations are. But that it will be made public, it's something that Treasury can respond to, because we didn't commission the report, and therefore we don't own the report. And then on the issues to Kenneth's question, whether the media will be allowed in the financing seminar, no, we have agreed that we're going to operate on the Chatham House rules. I think there's a lot that we need to ensure that we engage on with the financing fraternity in relation to the question of transmission financing. But we have agreed on the following. Of course, when we open, that will be live streamed. But immediately after that, then we will have a press briefing to take you through some of the issues that have come out of the transmission seminar. And to the extent that some of those could be extended to the next briefing, I think Tsakan will make that determination, whether it's the next briefing and the one after, when a more detailed presentation on what came out. It's a different conversation. But immediately after that, we'll take the media through what are some of the things that are coming up. And I can imagine that what we have to do ourselves is to generate, if you like, a report through the structures of government to say this is what we think are the options going forward. And once a determination is made, I'm sure we'll be able to come out with a degree of certainty on how we want to resolve the issues of transmission. And clearly this is something that requires our attention. We'll do the same, of course, on the distribution side. When I say the same, not necessarily taking the form of a financing seminar, but essentially resolving with SALGA, ESCOM, and the multiple stakeholders on how best we need to be financing that the rollout of distribution infrastructure. Because in many instances, we have municipalities that are liquid, insolvent. They are not in a position to invest on the maintenance, refurbishment of the distribution infrastructure. And then you have third-party casualties. You have business, you have households who are in the dark for an extended period of time. I indicated the last time that in Orange Farm, there are communities that have not had electricity for the past 6 months. And that's largely on the back of a distribution infrastructure that has failed. So we think that there are these 3 tracks that we are attending to. Of course, in this briefing, there's an elevated attention on the generation side for obvious reasons. We know that there's an emerging problem, or a real problem, not emerging, it's sitting with us, because we cannot connect the renewable at the speed that we desire. So we know we have a transmission problem, and that's why the seminar will help us. And then we know we have a distribution problem. So all of these things are going to receive elevated attention. But let me take the opportunity to thank everyone for making time to listen to, if you like, our account of how are we doing against the Energy Action Plan, and also provide projections for the week ahead. So we're very grateful for your attendance. We wish you the best of today and the best to the Springboks. Well, I guess the result is almost a given tonight. This afternoon, it's a matter of how many points, but yeah, but all the best to the Springboks. Thank you very much, Saka.
Thank you very much, Minister and colleagues. Indeed, we've come to the end of today's media briefing. Until we convene again next week, same time. Thank you.